So, The Last of Us Chapter 9 is called Look for the Light. And this was a shorter episode than I expected it to be. It only clocks in at 43 minutes, but I felt like they did a nice job of wrapping up the story and fitting it into this shorter runtime. And I didn't feel like it was too short or anything like that. But there were a lot of I think that overall this show has been so well done and such a strong adaptation. And there might be some things here and there that I questioned throughout, but I thought they did a great job here with the finale. And we have a cold open in the beginning of the episode with Ellie's mom, whose name is Anna, and she is actually played by Ashley Johnson, who was the voice and the actress that portrayed Ellie in the video games. So it was really cool to see and hear her because her voice sounds just like Ellie, and so that was kind of cool because it felt like, oh, Ellie is coming from this woman who looks and sounds like her. So in this episode, we see that Ellie was actually born as her mom was being bitten by an infected, and the umbilical cord was still connected at the time. So that might explain why Ellie is immune in some way, and we kind of get into that a little bit later in the episode. But it becomes clear in this flashback, in this cold open, that Marlene, who is the leader of the Fireflies, and Ellie's mom have known each other for their whole lives and are best friends and everything like that. And so as Anna is infected and knows she's going to be turning, she asks Marlene to take care of Ellie, or to keep her safe and everything. And according to the creators of the show, some of this information is going to be from the inside the episode and the podcast and everything. Marlene's decision, she thinks the safest place for Ellie to be is actually with Fedra, and that's how Ellie ends up growing up in the Fedra military school and everything like that. So I thought this was a very nice cold open to go back to show Ellie's mom and get some insight into the immunity or the possibility of why she's immune. But then we jump into the present, but it's a month after the last episode. And Ellie is very quiet in the beginning of this episode. Normally she's the one that is, cracking jokes and trying to ask Joel a bunch of questions. But here she's really quiet. And I think she's maybe still traumatized from killing David, what happened in the previous episode a month ago for her. Whereas Joel's actually the one who's talking a lot and even is joking around with her. Once talks about wanting to teach her to play the guitar and says he'll sing for her. He's trying to connect with her. He's feeling better now after his injury and infection and everything like that. And I think he's just trying to connect with who he sees now as his daughter, basically. And another thing I liked from this beginning part of the episode was how Joel boosted Ellie up, and then had her go to get the ladder, just like in the video game. That's something that happens a lot in the game. So I like that. I always like when there's those nods to the video game. And basically something that gets Ellie talking and gets her excited again is seeing a giraffe and feeding the giraffe and everything. It kind of brings a lighthearted moment into the episode. And then we get this view of like several giraffes and everything around Salt Lake City. And Joel for a moment looks at her and says, we don't have to do this. We don't have to continue on. There's risk involved. We could just go back to Tommy's. We could go back home. We could go back to Jackson. But Ellie is determined to see this through. And she says, it can't all be for nothing. Everything I've done can't be for nothing. We have to see this through, basically. But she says, after this is done, I'll follow you wherever you go, which I was just so, like, I thought that was such a great line and a beautiful moment. Her saying, I'll follow you wherever you go. Like, we're in this together. And their relationship has really reached its potential here. So I really like that moment. And of course, after something good happens in this show, shortly thereafter, something bad happens. So the Fireflies find Ellie and Joel. They knock Joel out and take them to the hospital in Salt Lake City. And Joel wakes up, he comes to, and Marlene is there and tells Joel that they're prepping her for surgery. And he's like, what surgery? Because I don't think it entered Ellie's mind or Joel's mind the sacrifice that she would have to make to find a cure, or to be able to use her for a cure. And basically, Marlene tells Joel that they have to do surgery on her brain to remove the cordyceps, and try to replicate the results, because her cordyceps, the way they react with other cordyceps is they tell it seems like she's infected. In order to replicate that, they basically have to kill her. And Joel's like, no, that's not happening, you know. And Joel is just at that point where he's going to do everything he can to protect Ellie at this point. He failed to protect his daughter Sarah. He failed to protect Tess. He is not going to fail to protect Ellie, and he just goes into fight mode, and he kills everybody on his path between he and Ellie. And the interesting part of this scene is, I thought I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be like the big action scene. This is going to be like a big shootout and everything. So I was a little disappointed when the score took over, and it was almost just you couldn't like hear much of what was happening, and he was just going through all these people. And the creators of the show explained that they didn't want this to be like some big action scene where they glamorized the violence and everything like that. They wanted it to be more of a sad thing, and for the score to take over, because Joel was basically, in their words, he was burning his own soul to get to Ellie and to save Ellie. But just now that I'm talking about the score, I think the score is so well done in this show throughout the whole course of the show. The score it tends to be a little bit more on the subtle side, but there's certain notes, like those violin notes, that just bring you back to the game if you played the game like I did, and just there's a lot of moments with the score, just feels like I'm back in the game and everything like that. Joel basically saves Ellie and gets her out of there. He even, kills the doctor that was about to perform surgery on her. And Marlene makes one last plea with Joel, like, okay, you can still make this right. We can still save all these people. You just have to let Ellie do this. What do you think she would want you to do? And he kills Marlene too. He's like, he knows that she will mount forces and come after her again. So he just eliminates her. That's all he can see right now, is just saving Ellie. So when Ellie wakes up, Joel basically lies to her and says that there are many more immune people like her out there. And, but the cure hasn't worked, and they stopped trying. They were just running tests on her blood, but knew it wouldn't work. And I don't know if Ellie fully trusts that explanation or not, but Joel's basically, lying to her to save her, pretty much. And he told Marlene that it shouldn't be Marlene's choice what happens, basically, but at the same time, he's making it his choice. He's by withholding the truth from Ellie. She doesn't get to choose really what to do. He does. So I can't say I wouldn't do the same thing as Joel if I were, in that position, because I am a father. I have a daughter. I would probably stop at nothing to save her in this situation, especially if they were going to do some kind of surgery on her that would kill her, that I didn't have a say in, or that she didn't have a say in. So yeah, I can't say that I wouldn't do the same thing. I don't know. I think when you're a parent, it just changes things. And you think about things in a different way. And this is that age-old argument about, is it worth sacrificing one life to save thousands, potentially millions of others? And different people might have different ways of looking at this. And I know this has been a kind of a controversial ending for 10 years now, the way the video game ended. So Joel, it looks like, takes Ellie back to Jackson, and he finally tells Ellie about Sarah, and Ellie tells him about the first person that she shot and killed, and that was Riley, um, who she had to kill because she was infected. And she makes him swear that what he said about the Fireflies was true at the end of the episode, and he says he swears it was true. So I'm curious to see what will end up happening if and likely when she finds out the truth. But listening to the inside, watching the inside the episode and listening to the podcast, there were some more insights here. Um, Craig Mason and Neil Druckmann talking about how this story is about the beautiful and dark sides of love, what love can cause you to do, how it can be a beautiful thing, but how it can lead to even violence and death. Um, Joel told Ellie the true story of how he got his scar in this episode, that he attempted to actually kill himself, but he flinched and missed. And so Ellie now knows the truth about Joel, and he was being vulnerable with her, which is what she really wanted, from him and everything. They also said the easiest choice that Joel's made in his whole life is saving Ellie over the whole world, because she is now his whole world. And so that was an easy choice for him. And they pointed out that just when Joel and Ellie are becoming completely honest with each other, he lies to her in the end to protect her. And so that trust is going to be broken. And I guess the question is, how will she react to this when she discovers the truth? I know how she reacts to this because I started playing The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know if it'll be identical, but I know how she reacts to this. I'm curious to see how the show handles it. And another interesting point was that Ellie was basically born into violence. In the beginning of the episode, we see she's born into it, and it might be why she's obsessed with violence, because she was kind of born into it and born into this violent world. And a quote that Craig Mason said that I thought was really interesting is, loving people tends to trump simple morality. So when people are so in love with somebody, or they love somebody so much, it can be even hard for them to make simple moral decisions and what might be clear choices to other people. So that's part of this episode too. And Neil Druckmann shared that they would run play tests for the game and everything like that. And they would ask people what they thought about Joel's decision. And what they found was, if they weren't a parent, then it would be like 50-50 what they thought of Joel's decision. But if they were a parent, then they 100% agreed with Joel's decision, which, is kind of what I said about myself earlier. And so I thought that was interesting. And yeah, that basically brings us to the end of The Last of Us season 1 and my reviews of The Last of Us. I think overall they did a tremendous job of adapting this to be faithful to the game, but also to make some other choices for different reasons, whether you agree or disagree with them. But I think this is the best adaptation of a game into a show or a movie that I've seen. Again, I'm curious to see what happens in season 2, and there's some news regarding season 2. The Last of Us Part 2 will be split up into multiple seasons on HBO. So that's pretty interesting, because The Last of Us Part 2 is about twice the length of The Last of Us Part 1. And speaking with GQ, Craig Mason said that there was no way it was going to be just one season, and that more than one season is factually correct. And Neil Druckmann also followed up on that and said that it will be more than one season. Some of the things that he's looking forward to in part 2 are the changes that they've discussed and seeing the story come to life again in this other version. And I think it's exciting because it leans into those feelings you had from the game really heavily in a new way. And Craig Mason says, I think we know what we're doing on this one. I'm not saying that in a snarky way. I'm saying that in a hopeful way. There are going to be things that are going to be different, and there are things that are going to be identical. There are things that are going to be added and enriched. There are some things that are going to be flipped. Our goal remains the same as the first season: deliver a show that makes fans happy. Um, so I gotta say that I didn't love some of the things that happened in The Last of Us Part Two, um, the game. So I'm curious to see what happens. I never finished the game, which I really need to do. I need to finish The Last of Us Part Two, especially after seeing season one and everything. Um, and I'm curious to see if my opinion on it changes. But I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody that doesn't want to know what might happen going into season two. But um, I don't know how I feel about it. Part of me really wants to see it, and another part of me knows what happens, at least in the video game, and I'm kind of torn, like, because there's something that happens that I just completely hated and disagreed with. But um, yeah, what did you guys think of The Last of Us season one? The Last of Us seasons two and three will be on the horizon, because we're definitely going to get more than one season for The Last of Us Part Two video game, and I don't know if there's going to be a third part for the video games, or more seasons than just three total. But we will see. Again, I haven't seen what happens at the end of The Last of Us Part Two, but again, what are your thoughts on this show? Let me know in the comment section. And that is all for The Last of Us season one.